Dinner began with the same old script. My father held court at the head of the table, one hand curled around a glass of red, the other gesturing toward me like a stage prop. "Our analyst returns," he said, smiling too wide. "Still shuffling those papers?" The cousins laughed. Linda laughed. Even my sister managed a smirk, eyes down in her wine. I cut my chicken quietly. "You know," my father went on, "I always said she'd make a great receptionist, detail-oriented, quiet, great at not being in the way." He winked at his own joke. He liked to land punches with a grin. That way, if you flinched, it was your fault for not taking a joke. "I coordinate operations," I said, not looking up. He raised his glass. "Exactly. Desk job." A fork scraped a plate. Someone cleared their throat. My cousin's boyfriend, Jared, I think, tilted his head slightly. Retired Air Force. The type who stands like he still expects to be saluted. I hadn't spoken to him beyond the front door. I shook his hand. He nodded once. That was it. Now he was watching me, not with the bored glance of someone enduring small talk. This was sharper, slower. He was listening to how I said the words, the rhythm, the lack of filler, the cadence you don't forget, even years after discharge. He set his fork down neatly and said, "What kind of coordination?" The room shifted, just enough to notice. Not a pause exactly, but the kind of stillness that falls over a place when a storm is about to change direction. My father chuckled, waving the question off. "She probably can't say. Top secret memos and coffee runs." Jared didn't smile. "Actually," he said, still looking at me, "she can say more than you think." I met his eyes for the first time. "You brief?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Ever work interagency?" I nodded once. "Joint tasking." He frowned slightly. "Overseas?" "Not officially." He sat back in his chair. The noise of the room began to recede like someone had turned down the volume. My father's voice was still moving, but nobody was really following it anymore. Jared turned to my cousin, touched her arm. "Can I borrow your phone for a second?" She handed it over, confused. He tapped quickly. "Search something." I watched the shape of the silence change. Chairs shifted, plates slowed. Someone poured more wine but didn't drink it. Jared stopped scrolling. His expression didn't change, but he looked at me again. Not like a guest or a boyfriend now, not like someone passing time at a family dinner. "You're Sentinel," he said quietly. "You're the one from the Dara file, Operation Winterhold." The name hit harder than anything I could have said. There are words that don't exist publicly, names that don't show up on CVs or press releases, just redacted briefings, closed-door hearings, classified appendices passed hand to hand. Now it was quiet. Linda's fork hovered midair. My sister turned her head slightly like she hadn't heard right. My aunt blinked twice. The room felt smaller than it had a minute ago, warmer, too warm. My father's face didn't change, not at first. He was still smiling, still holding his glass. But his eyes had narrowed just enough to betray something, confusion or doubt, or the slow dawning awareness that maybe, just maybe, there was something here he had never been told, had never thought to ask. He cleared his throat. "I thought that was a nickname," he said with forced lightness. "One of those online aliases." Jared didn't laugh. "No, sir. That was her operational code name. She's been working with CENTCOM, SOCOM, JSOC, depending on the month. I remember Winterhold. It came up in a command debrief when I was rotating out. Nobody knew who coordinated the evac, only that the decisions came fast, clean, with backup already in motion. I remember someone saying, Sentinel saw it 2 days before we did." My father lowered his glass, slowly. "That can't be right." He wasn't speaking to Jared. He was speaking to himself. Jared's voice didn't change. "She gave our team 12 minutes notice before a village lockdown, got the civilians out before the road was closed, saved lives, more than a few." He looked around the table. "That's not a desk job." No one spoke. Not right away. Someone coughed. A chair creaked. My aunt set down her wine with a soft clink. The only sound was the refrigerator cycling on in the kitchen. I cut another piece of chicken, ate it, swallowed. My father cleared his throat again, louder this time. Well, if it's that important, why didn't you ever say anything? I wiped my mouth with my napkin. Wasn't relevant. It's relevant now, Jared said. He wasn't defending me, just stating something plainly. He looked uncomfortable. The kind of discomfort that comes from realizing you've underestimated someone who outranks the room. I looked across the table at Linda. Her smile had gone rigid. My sister looked like she was waiting for someone to break the spell. You're serious? She asked Jared. You're saying she's like, what, some kind of spy? He shook his head. Not a spy, coordination, like she said. Command through systems, quiet work. But every team I knew that made it back in one piece had her fingerprints on the op. She wasn't in the field, she was behind the field. He turned to me again, slower this time. You wrote the shift orders for Bravo 9. That's why the fallback route got repathed through low ground. I nodded. That got passed off as an accident, he said. A training variation. I know. He exhaled slowly. Jesus. I didn't respond. Across from me, my father's expression had changed again. Not confusion now, not sarcasm. Something older, more brittle. He looked at me the way people look at strangers they've been living with for years. You were just gone all the time, he said quietly. I figured you were doing admin, helping, supporting. I was. He stared. But not like that. No. Why didn't you tell us? I folded my napkin. You never asked. Linda spoke next. Her voice was soft, careful. You coordinated evacuations? Yes. How many? I looked at her, and this time I didn't answer. The silence returned, heavier now. Everyone was trying to piece together what had just happened, what it meant, what it undid. Jared looked down at his hands, then back at me. I read about you once, he said. They said there was one name that came up behind every success where command never got credit. Nobody ever saw her. Nobody even knew where she was based, but her decisions lined up too clean to be luck. He paused. They said she didn't work for medals. She worked for results. The room was still. I stood and carried my plate to the sink, ran the water, rinsed the knife slowly. It was a small act, but in that moment it landed harder than anything I could have said. When I turned back, the whole table was watching. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. I walked to the door and picked up my coat. I'll be heading out, I said. You're not staying? Linda asked. No. It's still early. Yes, I said. It is. I walked past my father. He didn't reach for me, didn't say my name. Jared stood. Ma'am, he said quietly. I looked at him. Don't salute. Not here. He nodded once, stepped back. As I opened the front door, I heard my sister whisper, she was running things all along, wasn't she? No one answered. Outside, the cold air settled around me like clarity. The door clicked shut behind me. The drive home was quiet. No music, just the hum of the tires and the low thrum of something old folding in on itself. I took the longer route, past the strip mall that used to be a field, past the old gym where I did laps in silence before dawn. The lights inside were still on, but the sign had changed. New name, same structure. It was nearly 10 by the time I parked. I sat in the car for a while with the engine off, hands still on the wheel. Not frozen, just listening. When I finally stepped out, the sky was dark enough to see stars, the kind that disappear in city light but still hang there, quiet and steady. Inside, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. The apartment was clean, orderly, everything where it belonged. I left my coat on the back of the chair, kicked off my shoes. The silence here wasn't heavy, it was deliberate. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, set it on the table and didn't drink it. My phone buzzed once. I didn't check it. Instead, I sat, let my shoulders drop. The stillness pressed in the right way this time, not like waiting, but like preparation. The calm before an action. The next morning, I woke early. My body always does, whether I let it or not. The habits outlast the alarms. I showered, made coffee, read 2 reports on my tablet while oatmeal simmered on the stove. The world still moved, missions still queued, teams still waited for clean air and quick plans. I answered 2 flagged emails, escalated 1 conflict over personnel redundancy in a training wing, drafted a memo about logistics continuity in a secondary theater. Then I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. Jared knew. That wasn't the part that mattered most. It was that he recognized. In our line, recognition comes sparingly, often not at all. Sometimes you get a medal folded in a velvet box. Sometimes you get a quiet nod across a hallway. Sometimes you get nothing, and you keep moving. But when someone knows, really knows, what you did and what it meant, it doesn't change who you are. It changes what other people can't say anymore. At 08:30, my phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. At 09:02, another text from my sister. So, what was that last night? No punctuation, a sure sign she was trying not to seem rattled. I didn't respond. At 09:54, one more. Dad's confused. Maybe you could call him? Not angry, not mocking, just trying to find the floor again. By noon, the story had likely spread through the extended family, my cousin's group chat, an aunt who would claim she always suspected there was more to it, a nephew who Googled my name and came up empty. There was nothing to find. That's the point. I changed into running gear and left my phone on the counter. 5 miles. Cool air. A route I knew so well I didn't need to think. By the 3rd mile, I could feel my muscles settle into rhythm. The tension dropped from my shoulders like a weight released without comment. At home, I stretched, drank water, sat cross-legged on the floor and stared at the wall. The aftershocks were starting. They always come slowly, not the night of, not when the silence is thick and everyone is pretending it's fine. They come the day after, when the gaps in the story get larger than the story itself. At 1400, a call came in from an unknown number. I let it go. 10 seconds later, a voicemail. My father. Hey, so, that was different. Long pause. Not sure how to... I didn't know. I guess I should have. You were always quiet about your work. Guess I didn't push. Another pause. You coming next weekend? Your sister's birthday. Then he hung up. No mention of what was said. No apology. No questions. Just the vague, half-shaped language of a man trying to move past something he hasn't actually stepped through. I archived the voicemail, opened a secure folder, finished reviewing 2 reports from Jakarta and 1 from Brussels, tagged 3 high-priority briefs, saved them for morning. At 18:30, I checked the front door. Nothing. At 19:07, a knock. Jared. He stood with a straight back, hands clasped loosely behind him. No jacket, just a gray shirt and jeans. Civilian, but not untrained. I opened the door halfway. Didn't invite him in. Didn't mean to show up unannounced, he said. You did? Yeah. Silence. I just wanted to say, he began, then paused. I didn't mean to put you in the spotlight. That wasn't fair. You didn't. He studied my face. Still, I shouldn't have said anything in front of them. You were careful. He nodded. They weren't. I stepped back just enough for him to see I wasn't going to invite him in. I recognized the name, he said quietly, but I didn't connect it to you until you spoke. Doesn't matter. It does. I waited. You changed how that dinner went, how they talk about you, your father especially. I raised an eyebrow. He's off balance, not used to being corrected. He wasn't corrected. Jared paused. That's true. I glanced down the hall. The porch light was flickering again. I'd fix it later. You don't owe them anything, he said. Not even explanation. I know. He looked like he wanted to say more. then thought better of it. "I'll go," he said. "Good night, Jared." He nodded and stepped away. When the door closed, I locked it. Stood there a moment longer, hand still on the knob. That night, I slept soundly. No dreams, no noise. Just the kind of sleep that comes when something unfinished finally settles into place. The next morning, I received a message from legal, a request to review the latest declassification queue. I skimmed the list, 4 files. One of them was mine. Not the full report, just fragments, sanitized timelines, location codes scrubbed, command decisions rendered anonymous. The kind of document that confirms nothing and implies everything. I checked the release schedule. It would be public by the end of the quarter. No names, no direct attribution. But those who knew how to read between lines would see the pattern. The same call structure, the same coordination style, the same invisible hand. It didn't bother me. Visibility wasn't the goal, but clarity. That mattered. That was enough. The declassification notice didn't change anything in my day-to-day work. It just meant the file would be viewable by people who didn't know what to do with it. Names replaced with call signs. Commands labeled by tier. Impact measured in outcomes instead of directives. I'd seen it before. How something real gets flattened into format. How stories become numbers, then rumors, then nothing. The file didn't include my name, but Jared would recognize the cadence. And if he said nothing else to anyone, the weight of that silence would do enough. Recognition travels quietly among people who've needed it most. 2 days passed before my father reached out again. This time it wasn't a voicemail, it was an email. Subject line: dinner? Just that. No greeting, no sign-off, no acknowledgement of what had happened. The way people in my family handle impact. Pretend nothing landed. I didn't answer. The next morning, my supervisor pinged me with a direct request. Review protocols for a cross-agency coordination exercise, Tier 2. I was listed as primary oversight. The operation wasn't urgent, but it mattered. That's what my life had been. Not flashy, not heroic, just essential. Done correctly, no one noticed. By the weekend, my sister sent a message through our shared family thread. "Dad says you're being distant. Did something happen?" I didn't answer that either. It was Saturday afternoon when the shift finally began to echo back through them. I heard from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in a year. "Hey, meant to say I didn't know you were involved in ops work. Respect. That's huge." I ignored it. Another message came later from an old high school friend, now working admin at an embassy overseas. She didn't say how she found out, just that she had. I read something, figured out the rest. "I'm proud of you." Pride is easy when it doesn't cost anything. I muted the conversation, went for another run. The air was cold enough to bite. I liked it better that way. It keeps people honest. At home, I showered, dried my hair, cooked dinner. Alone. No music, no calls. At 20:30, the doorbell rang. Not Jared this time. My father. He stood in the hallway like a contractor waiting to be let in. Same coat, same posture. Hands in pockets, mouth pressed flat. I opened the door. Didn't step aside. "You have a minute?" he asked. I didn't answer, but I let the silence stretch. He looked at his feet, then back up. I didn't realize how much I didn't know. "That's clear." He swallowed. "You could have told me." "No," I said. "You would have laughed." "I was joking." "You always are." I stepped back, left the door open. He came in slowly, not like he was unsure, but like he expected me to change my mind. The living room was as it always was. Spare, clean, no photographs, no clutter, nothing sentimental. He looked around like he'd never seen it before. Maybe he hadn't. "I kept thinking about that night," he said, "about how Jared reacted, like he'd seen something." He had. My father sat stiffly on the edge of the couch, didn't lean back, didn't remove his coat. "You know, when you first left for the military, I thought it was a phase." "I know. I thought you'd do a few years. Come back. Settle down. Work something practical. I didn't answer. He looked down at his hands. When I used to joke about your job, I didn't mean anything by it. Yes, you did. He looked up sharply. Intent doesn't undo impact, I said. He was quiet for a moment. I thought I was being supportive in my own way. I stared at him. I thought if I made it light, it wouldn't seem like distance. It was distance. He looked like he wanted to argue. Then he stopped himself. Why didn't you ever correct me? I leaned back in the chair. You weren't listening. He winced. That's not fair. I said nothing. He exhaled. I don't know how to talk to you. You don't need to. Just stop rewriting things. He looked confused. What things? The story. My story. What I do. What it means. You tell people I teach, that I file papers, that I take notes. You've told that version for so long you started believing it. I didn't mean to. You needed it to be small, because it wasn't yours. He froze. You like control. You like being the expert. You like the laugh to land when you're in charge of the room. His jaw flexed. You think I'm a bad father? No, I said. I think you needed me to be manageable. He didn't respond. His eyes darted around the room again, like he was searching for proof of something he could still name. You know I grew up hard, he said quietly. I'm not your past. He blinked. I didn't ask for your trauma, I said, and I didn't offer mine. He rubbed his hands together. So what now? Now you leave. He looked startled. I didn't invite you here to reconcile, I said. You wanted to talk. You talked. He stood, slowly. I want to understand, he said. Then listen better. He walked to the door. Hand on the knob, he turned back. You're angry. No, I said. I'm done. He didn't reply, just nodded once. Left. The door clicked shut behind him. No slam, no argument, just closure, clean and quiet. I stood in the hallway for a moment, then turned off the porch light. That was the last time he came to my apartment. 2 weeks later, the declassification hit public channels, quietly, without announcement. A handful of defense analysts posted about it in obscure threads. A few military journalists flagged the language, odd phrasing, atypical syntax, cross-branch precision. They noticed the signature buried in the briefings, the consistency, the style. A few speculated the operations must have been handled by someone high-ranking, possibly special tasking, possibly retired. One post from a verified user with an Air Force background said, "Whoever Sentinel is, they knew before anyone else. Respect." No debates followed, just a line of quiet acknowledgments. I read the thread once, then closed the tab. The next morning, my inbox was flooded with coordination requests, some routine, some urgent. I answered each one with the same measured tone I'd always used, precise, unemotional, clear. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. My father didn't contact me again, not directly. My sister sent messages sometimes. They felt half permission, half curiosity. Dad's been quiet lately, not like him. You really ran those ops? Did you always know what you were doing? I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, because I'd already said enough. When someone sees what they refused to believe for years, it leaves them adrift. They start looking for ways to frame it without changing themselves. I had no interest in helping with that. It was early spring when Jared reached out again, not in person, just a message. You don't owe me anything, but if you ever want to talk shop, I'd listen. No pretense, no expectation. I answered, not today, maybe someday. He didn't push. That was the difference. He knew how to respect what wasn't said. The following month passed without disruption. Work remained steady. Briefings, reviews, response planning. I traveled once, low profile, to a coordination summit under diplomatic cover. Nothing new, nothing public, Just the same silent machinery turning behind missions no one would name. I arrived, listened, made corrections others hadn't seen, left without being quoted. At home, spring settled slowly into the city. Branches along the avenue thickened. Students reappeared on sidewalks in light jackets. One morning, I opened the window while making coffee and let the air in. No symbolism, just oxygen. The shift wasn't external. It was in how people hesitated now before describing me. The phone calls I didn't return. The invitations I declined. The way my silence stopped being assumed and started being considered. Jared didn't write again. He didn't need to. My cousin texted me a photo. Jared standing in their backyard beside her, holding a beer. He wasn't smiling. He never smiled for the camera. But I could tell he was settled. I didn't reply, but I looked at the photo for a long time. My sister sent a birthday invitation, a group lunch at a vineyard an hour outside the city, family only. I deleted it. Then, a week later, came the envelope. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My father's. Still angled like a blueprint, letters tight, even under pressure. Inside, a single page. You were right. I built my life around being the one who knew more, the one who led the room. I didn't leave room for anyone else to be more than me, but you didn't need my permission. You didn't wait for the room to notice. You ran it anyway. That's the part I never understood, and the part I finally respect. You don't need to write back. Dad. No signature. No apology. Just admission. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with others. Old commendations, clipped reports, a photo from a desert airstrip I never showed anyone, not to keep it, just to acknowledge its time. That evening, I returned to the file marked Closed, Dara. I had full access, even to the part still withheld from public release. I reread the final mission summary. 1 evac, 0 civilian casualties, no medals issued, no mention of my name. Just a line at the bottom of the page. Initiated via advance coordination, unflagged. I closed it. Summer brought more travel. Quiet bases. Rooms where no one wore rank, just clearance. Briefings where everyone listened and no one introduced themselves. During one meeting, an operations lead from Naval Intelligence looked at me and said, "You're the one who saw the shift in April. We rerouted a whole convoy off that." He didn't ask how, just nodded like someone who's been close to the edge. I nodded back. That was the kind of recognition I knew how to live with, the kind that never asks for a story. In August, Linda emailed me. Subject, quick question. I almost didn't open it, but I did. We were wondering if you'd be willing to come to dinner next month. It's Dad's birthday. Just a small gathering. No speeches. You don't have to bring anything. We'll understand if you're busy. No pressure. Just enough space to make a refusal feel like my own. I didn't reply. I didn't go. Not out of anger. Just preservation. That family system had needed me to be smaller. Now that I wasn't, it wasn't my job to reassure them I was safe to have back in the room. They could make peace with their discomfort in their own time. Or not. Either way, I had nothing left to explain. In September, an article circulated quietly through internal defense networks. It wasn't public, but people read it. Invisible Anchors, the hidden architects of crisis navigation. No byline, no names, but it outlined the shift in operational doctrine over the last 5 years, the increase in coordination-led successes, the absence of visible command structures, the efficiency of decisions made not by force but by convergence. The phrase, quiet authority, appeared more than once. The author referenced Winterhold, Dara, 6 other missions. At the end, a paragraph. We've spent too long valuing volume over precision, charisma over clarity, visibility over command. There are leaders we never saw, but their choices wrote the ending we got. Every system that held, every person who made it out, did so because someone invisible moved first. A colleague sent it to me with a single message. They're starting to understand. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That fall, I was invited to speak at a closed-door panel on leadership under silence. 10 attendees, no recording, no transcript. I said yes. At the event, the moderator asked if I wanted to share a name. I said, Sentinel. That was enough. They listened. No one interrupted. No one asked if I felt proud. They just took notes. I told them about systems, not stories. How every successful mission is a machine of quiet decisions made before anyone's looking. How coordination isn't about visibility, it's about accuracy. I didn't tell them anything classified, but I told them how power moves when no one's watching, how leadership isn't a volume dial, it's a lever, and most of the time, you pull it alone. After, one of the attendees approached. "Did anyone ever say thank you?" he asked. I looked at him. "Sometimes," I said, "but that's not what kept us steady." He nodded, shook my hand. "I hope you keep leading," he said. I never stopped. Winter came early. The first frost settled in mid-November. I didn't put up decorations. I didn't send cards. I did get a letter, though, from a foundation I'd worked with quietly years earlier. They were setting up a scholarship fund for students interested in international coordination. They asked if I'd be willing to choose the first recipient. I agreed. When they asked what name should be listed on the paperwork, I wrote, "In honor of those who led without praise." The check cleared. The student was selected. I never met them. That was by design. I didn't want gratitude, just direction. Now, when I return home, when I choose to, my father doesn't talk about work. He asks if I've been sleeping, if I've been eating well. His jokes are still there, but they land differently, gentler. He doesn't ask me to explain. That's what changed. Not the job, not the title, not the story, just the silence after. He sits a little longer now, speaks a little less. Sometimes I catch him watching me like he's still trying to adjust the picture in his head, but he never asks what I do anymore. He knows better. Some people think silence is absence, but I know better. I've seen what silence can do when it's held with intention, when it waits instead of retreats, when it doesn't defend itself, just endures. The work I did never needed a stage. It needed certainty, and the willingness to be doubted until the results spoke louder than I ever could. So when someone at a table laughs at your quiet job, your vague title, your small words, don't correct them. Let the silence hold. Let the room speak for you, eventually. And when it does, don't return to claim the space. Leave it. Let them realize how long you were running it from the edge. You've stayed with me this far. Thank you for reading. What did this story bring to mind for you? If you'd like more stories like this, quiet, restrained, and real, consider subscribing. You'll never be pressured, just invited.